With real impact, and so happy to have you with us today to talk about something that's very important, things that are exploding all over the country right now. Parental rights is a big issue. We are seeing parents showing up at school board meetings like we've never seen before and fighting to hold on to their parental rights and fighting about the things that their children are being exposed to. So today our topic is about California parental rights and a policy that has been introduced and will be shared throughout the districts across the state of California. And we have one parental rights policy in particular that we are supporting because it is good policy. It's been vetted by many attorneys, and they believe that this policy will stand up in law in the state of California. So to talk about this today, this very important policy, is my friend Lance Christensen. Lance is someone that is very well known in the state of California when it comes to the topic of education, because Lance has just jumped into the whole education field, whether it's local school board meetings or statewide issues. So Lance, why don't you go ahead and tell people about yourself?
Hey, thanks, Gina, for having me on. It's always good to be with you, of course. My name is Lance Christensen. I live up in Northern California in a small county. It's a large county, but small population of Yuba. And I'm a father of 5 kids. My wife and I have been married for almost 23 years, and I worked for about 17 years in the legislature. And so I know how the proverbial sausage is made and what kinds of things that our legislature does. And it was a few years back as people were starting to alert us in that job that a lot of the sex ed stuff was going awry and askew, and it was problematic, that I decided to dive deeper into the policy process and really participate with parents across the state in helping them understand and better prepare themselves for the stuff they were working on. And so between that and then also running last year for state superintendent of public instruction, I had the chance to really meet people where they were and in all corners of the state. And what I found is that there are a lot of parents out there who just simply want to be a part of their children's lives. And any parent knows this. It's hard to be a parent. It's not easy. It's not a cookie cutter situation. Every child is different, and parents should have the right, the ability, and the choice to make decisions about their children and their future and what kind of education they're getting. And so that's where you and I are both in the fray and in the fight, trying to make sure that parents across the state of California can be actively involved in every decision that's made about their child.
Yeah, and your career, Lance, has helped us to learn more about because of your background. So thank you so much for doing this. And thank you for actually stepping out to run for superintendent of education in California. We supported you. We knew that you would be able to make a difference, and hopefully maybe you'll run again one day again. But right now what we're faced with is a situation in our schools across the state of California that they're implementing policies that help keep secrets from parents. And that's the last thing parents want. Parents want the right to know about what's happening with their children. And so what we've seen is parents showing up and fighting for those rights. But the best way to get this right implemented into the school district is to implement it through policy. And so Chino Valley Unified School District is introducing a policy that we are supporting. And so I want parents to understand what this policy is about. Now, one of the main things parents need to know is that this is a proposed policy by one school district. It does not have to be the same exact policy that every school district wants. So school districts can manipulate the text and make it into whatever they want it to be. So Lance, you have read this district policy. We've studied it, we've discussed it, and we've decided to support it. So why don't you tell parents what is in this parental rights policy?
So taking one step back, what we see in the legislature is a very confused general public policy on kids and parental rights, especially as it pertains to those children who are facing issues of gender confusion. And because of previous law in the state of California, it was written to allow for boys to play on girls' teams and girls to play on boys' teams and use their locker rooms and restrooms, The policy has been in place for about a decade, but nobody's really taken it seriously. I think that a lot of people felt like, well, yes, that's law, but nobody's really going to do it. And over the last year, we've seen that a lot of school districts are facing some very real challenges when a very strident and vocal minority wants to impact the schools and their restrooms and their locker rooms, and when they want their boys to play on girls' teams and compete against them. We saw this happen in the state state track championship this year. So we have a policy that just simply is meant to correct the misnomers of what the actual state law is and implement it in a way that every school district can be able to take care of those kids who are challenged, who are really confused, but also not do it at the sake and at the expense of all the rest of the students in the school. And so we put together a policy that has three main components. It talks, one, about being safe. How can we have a safe school policy where kids feel like they're going to an environment where they won't be harmed or in danger or face really difficult pressures? We want every student to feel that way. Number two, we saw this during the pandemic. There's a lot of kids that feel hopeless and anxious and depressed. And we also saw a huge increase in suicide ideation, and we want to make sure we address that. And if there are adults that are watching this play out at school, we want them to be attentive to those things. And then three is, when a child decides they're going to transition, socially at least, the parents have every right to know what's happening. And this is kind of where I think the crux of a lot of the challenges come in on this kind of policies, because a lot of people feel like this is taking one step too far, putting a lot of teachers or administrators in a position of outing these kids that want to be maintain a secret. The problem is you can't really keep secrets from parents in any meaningful way. And if a child is socially transitioning at school, everybody knows except for the parent. And how difficult must that be for parents who end up finding about the situation from their child's friend or from a teammate, or maybe another parent who hears about it and calls them up and asks them those kinds of questions? I think that damages the trust between a parent and a school, which is vital. If in the state of California we want to have a functioning education system and public schools, you have to have trust between the parents, the teachers, and the administrators. And when that ceases to exist, and when administrators and teachers start to keep secrets from parents, then you don't have an education system. You have very much an indoctrination system, and that's a problem.
Exactly. And things have changed so much from the days that we were in the public school, and parents were actually partners with the teachers and the school administrators and the principal. And we're not seeing that anymore. We're seeing more and more teachers who, we know that there are great teachers. I have many friends who are teachers, but there are teachers who are also activists, who are, they lean into the whole, whatever it may be, LGBT community, or just the child has a right to privacy. And the child does not need to tell the parent anything about what's going on in their life once they step onto the school property. And that is just really troublesome. And we have seen homeschooling grow, as a matter of fact, because parents are feeling like they're not partners with the school any longer.
Well, and state law actually is very explicit about the ability for parents to understand and know everything that's going on in their children's lives. If you want to know or read about it, just go to Education Code section 51100 and 51101. It will give you the explicit rights that a parent has to know everything about what your child is doing. And what some school districts have decided to do is to take and create records that are off the books. So in other words, they're cooking the books. They're keeping these records on hard copy in locked filing cabinets away from the parents. And so as a child decides they don't want to be Jim, they would rather be Jamie, they may give them additional clothes at school to wear. They may change their pronouns. But the child may say to them, I don't want my parents to know this. So when they have a conference, all that information goes into this other file, and the teacher will show them everything that's in their report card and the test they took, but they won't talk about some of those crucial issues that probably are before them. And any parent who's had a child go through puberty, everyone knows this one fact that goes from beyond time is that teenagers don't know their head from a hole in the ground. And when you go through puberty and you go through challenging times, you often don't want to talk to your parents about anything. This is true of almost every single teenager I've ever known. So to keep those kinds of secrets away from parents who are there to love and to support and to be there with their children all the way through their formative years, to me is not just disingenuous. It teaches our children to lie. And it perpetuates this noble lie myth that we can go on and allow people in authority to lie to parents if it's just for the right reason.
Absolutely. And all of that's just so important. And there's so many aspects of parental rights that we could cover in a policy. But I think that what Chino Valley has done is they've covered some of the most important things. Parents want to know if their child has been involved in a physical altercation, whether they've been assaulted or whether or not they're the ones doing the assaulting, because getting in a fight at school, it's a very serious situation, and I'm glad that Chino Valley is addressing that. And then also the very important issue of suicide. The young people that have expressed thoughts or comments or anything to do with suicidal ideation, that is critical. Parents need to know about that, and that is so wonderful that this school district has been brave enough to step up and include this in their policy. You want to talk about why those two aspects are so important?
When we're dealing with a child at school, it's the whole child that we're thinking about. It's not just the academics. And interestingly enough, a lot of those on the left that have tried to take the culture and really be aggressive in this area talk about the whole child. But what they don't tell you is that they're not talking about the whole child for the family. They're talking about the whole child for the state. We don't want our kids to be just instruments of the state. And when you think about issues where a parent doesn't feel safe sending their kid to school because they have to deal with really difficult, maybe a gang situation, or maybe it's that child in class that causes a lot of problems, or maybe, as I have experienced personally with one of my children, they have a threat on their life. And if these things are happening at school, I think any reasonable teacher and administrator will want to share that information. And again, it's not just the external stuff, but if it's internal, they are really depressed. Things aren't going well in life. They're not dealing with problems and changes to their body, to their friend situation. Maybe they're struggling in their academics and they just think there's no other way forward. A parent should absolutely be involved in that conversation, because the fix is not going to be necessarily at the school. It's going to be in the other places, and maybe counseling is required. Maybe there's better or more involvement with friends and relatives. Maybe there are other ways that we can interact with these children to make sure that they know that they're loved. They know they're cared for. They know that they're really, as you and I would agree, a child of God, and they've got a purpose here on earth. So we want to make sure that there's an active communication that doesn't have some false barriers or walls put up, often by the teachers union. And what we're finding right now is a lot of the teachers in the union are incredible and fantastic people. I taught fourth grade myself. I love and adore many of the teachers that have taught my children. In fact, they become members of the family almost because we've become so close. But there are those who would not care as much about the kid, but care more about the institution and the union than they do the children. And we need to make sure that we're making people aware that there are sometimes when it's very appropriate for a parent to know very sensitive information that they might not otherwise know unless somebody tells them.
Absolutely. So as I read this policy and explained all the things that it's trying to do in this district, the conclusion I think we will all come to once we read this is that this is simply a parental notification policy. It doesn't say anything about we're going to stop our child from identifying as a different gender, or stop our child from preventing our child from playing on the other sports team or stepping into the opposite gender's restroom. This is just a right for the parents to know, because there's nothing in it that legally can stop the parent from enforcing something in the school district. This is just about parental notification. Why is that important?
Well, the Supreme Court for 100 years has reaffirmed that parents have absolute rights over their children. And if the right of notification is subverted because a teacher or an administrator or a counselor at school thinks that they know more about this child than the parent does, we have a thing coming to them. And it's not appropriate. It's not right. We're simply restating in public policy what the Supreme Court, what federal law, what state law allows us to already do, to make sure we're crystal clear who is the most important part of this conversation. And that's the parent. And so I'm excited about this policy. I think we will have a lot of districts throughout the state that want to adopt some form of this policy. They'll have to do their own sort of considerations and legal reviews to make sure they feel comfortable with it. But in the end, if you're a teacher and you see a child that is neglected or abused, you're mandated by law to report that to law enforcement. So I don't see why this is any more difficult on the other side. If your child is lonely and anxious and depressed and thinking things they shouldn't think, or trying to change who they are, who God made them to be, then again, I don't understand why it's hard to make a teacher a mandated, if for lack of a better term, report it to the parents and have that conversation. If they're uncomfortable, then an administrator at school should be able to do that. This is not rocket science. This is very simple. And if we destroy the trust between a school and parents, I promise you, parents will find a way out of the district faster than you can shake a stick at. And if California schools are hemorrhaging students, we've lost over 310,000 students in the last 3 years out of the public school system. It will just take something a little bit more to push more parents over the edge to say, we're done with public schools. We want nothing to do with them any further. And where public schools will really be for lack of resources going forward. And all because there was no trust between the two.
Absolutely. And now I want to transition a little into some objections that we may hear about this policy. And I know one of them has been thrown out over and over again, is that this policy is illegal. Explain why it's not illegal.
Well, it's not illegal because there's no law that says you can't tell a parent about a child's transition. It doesn't exist. Now, there was a bill in 2013 passed by Assembly Member Tom Amiano from San Francisco, AB 1266. You'll hear this lot, a reference to lot. The Department of Education has written a frequently asked questions response to this, but they've actually given the public very inaccurate and I would say falsifiable information. In there, they've interpreted the idea that these kids can choose different locker rooms and spaces they go to as some sort of, now the parents must be lied to protect that. That's not what the law says at all. And again, I would reference everyone back to Education Code, Section 51101, where they can actually identify the rights that a parent has to know all the information about their kids. We're simply building upon that. And frankly, federal law is very strong in this area too. And again, the Supreme Court continues to rule. Parents are the ultimate arbiters of all things with their kids. And you and I may disagree on how we raise our kids. It doesn't mean you're a bad parent. It just means we have different ways of doing it. And just multiply that times 6 million. We have 6 million parents in the state of California that are trying their very best to raise their kids as honestly as they can and in truth and righteousness. They're not all going to do it the same, but the state should be the last people to come in and tell them how they're doing it differently. And right now, again, state law is on the side of the parents, and it just simply clarifies what the policy should be at the local school board level.
And if you think about it, Lance, how could any loving parent say, don't tell me anything about my child? Don't tell me about what happened to them in school today. Don't tell me about what they're doing that may be something that is, life-changing. But I think all parents could agree with us that we should know about what's going on with our kids. So, Lance, any closing words?
Yeah, just one thing. Once you lose trust, it's impossible to regain it. And if a school is hiding information and they should not be honest arbiters or brokers of that information, a parent is not likely to trust them with anything else, including the care of their children. And local parentis is a very limited set of rights or obligations that a parent delegates to the school without releasing any of their wholehearted rights to have over their children. So just because we send kids to school does not mean we give up all privileges and rights there. We maintain them all the way through. And if they're hurt, we should know about it so we can help heal them. That's the key. And any good parent wants to heal their child, not make it worse.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Well, Lance, thank you for your time. I'm just praying that this school board policy just makes it across the state and parents' rights are restored where they have been stolen. But we appreciate you. We'll talk to you again and look forward to seeing you maybe on the campaign ballot one of these days soon, because you have so much to offer the families of California. So you take care, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
So now we're going to move on to our next guest, Karen England, and we're going to talk about more of how to take back your school district. But what Karen's going to focus on today is the practical side of how you actually do that. And Karen has an extensive career working in the school districts across the state of California and across the United States. So I'm so glad to have my good friend, Karen England with Capital Resource Institute, to continue this conversation. So Karen, why don't you go ahead and tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm the president of Capital Resource Institute, but I consider myself the ultimate kitchen table activist. I got started about 27 years ago in local school districts just as a mom with things that were going on. And so that's where I kind of got my start. And now the whole country has come full swing into seeing how important school districts are and working in their local communities to change their school board to effectively have parent-friendly policies at their school board. And so I'm excited to be on and help equip parents to reclaim their schools and reclaim their parental rights.
And the thing about the school districts, a lot of people, it's a mystery to some people because most people have never attended a school board meeting. I know that you love school board meetings and you've attended many, many school board meetings throughout the years and sometimes till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So you have a lot of experience and you have a lot of help for people. So as we talk about bringing a parent-friendly policy into our school district, you have some ideas that you'd like to share with people about how they can go about doing that.
Well,
so let's begin with some of the basics.
Okay. So you mentioned I've been doing this for a long time and I love them. The reason I love school board meetings is because I see so many parents that started just like me. Wow, if we just go tell them to change things, let's get excited, tell other people, and things will change. Well, now that is true. And so we can just use this policy to step by step go in and make a difference in our school district. So I think the first thing that parents are going to need to know and community members are about this policy and everything surrounding it, which we built a website for.
That's right. We have a website, caparentalrights.com, and that's where you're going to find a lot of this information that we're talking about today. Because most parents, like I said, do not know how to even begin to understand how to get a policy into the school district. And I think one of the basic things is probably getting to know your school board members and where they stand on issues.
Yes, absolutely. And with the internet, it's easier than ever to do that. If you're new and there's not a parent group in your community, first find out, are there parent groups in your community? Do you have anyone that's active in your church that's active in the local school boards? So kind of find out what's going on the ground. Then you want to start to find out if you've got any allies on the school board. And a good way to do that with the internet is to go look at prior school board meetings, and you can get a feel for the questions they're asking, the side of things they're taking, what they're advocating for and against. And you can then figure out where the school board is on this issue. And if you have someone who's like-minded, who respects parental rights, you're going to want to go try and work with that school board member to get this policy passed. You're going to want their support and help.
So a lot of parents don't even know that school board meetings are recorded by the school board and they are placed on the website. So you have to find your school district's website, go and look for the media recordings of prior meetings, and that's how you can start listening, learning where the school board members are on various issues, not just a parental rights issue. And that way you become more familiar with them and their approach to some of these issues.
Yeah, and it's really easy to find, so don't get intimidated by it. You go to the school district website, and then usually there's a lot of different tabs, and it might say community, it might say school, it might say Board of Education, and you click on that, and then they almost always have board meetings and agendas. Some of them will be specific about having the TV, but everything you need to find is usually within that link. And so it makes it really easy. You can go back and look at how they voted on all sorts of other things as well.
Okay, and so as we talk about parental rights policies, I think one of the basic things parents need to know is they need to know what is actually in the current school board policy. How do they find that?
Yes, well, that should be online, but when we're talking about this parental notification policy when kids are transitioning, some schools aren't putting that online. And so you will have to ask around. A board member may have to ask. You may have to actually do a public records request. And that is a request to the government agency, which is the school. And our website has a template for that for you to do. But you will ask them for the policy, and it's probably going to be called something like gender affirming or gender transitioning policy. But you will ask them and get a copy of the current policy. And I would imagine in 99% of the school districts in California, the school district policy is to only tell the parents that the child is transitioning if the child says, we want you to tell them.
Exactly, and that makes it very difficult for a parent to know what's going on. So with this school board policy that has been introduced and that we are supporting, that is going to make everything transparent for the parents. So let's get back to the school board policy for a moment, because we know that sometimes when you come across a school board policy, it's hundreds of pages, sections, and it could be quite confusing. People may not want to read through a school board policy. For me, the easiest way for me to search a policy is to save it as a PDF.
Yeah.
Then once it's a PDF, I do a word search. How do you find what's going on in school board policy?
Yes, I do that. And then I think we were both homeschool moms, so I did phonics. And I was just doing this with my staff today on a piece of legislation. I will do things where I cross out words that are maybe larger or might not have anything to do with it, and kind of pare down and circle, the words that are key. A lot of times they will do including, but not limited to, or, and it's like all that legalese. I kind of cut that out and highlight the words that say this policy tells parents, those key words. And that's how I best understand the policy, is to kind of mark it up in a way that makes sense to me and cross out words. Later, after I understand what it's saying, I can go back and put those legal words in a context. But it's easier than people think. And on this gender policy, they're usually pretty clear, and they're pretty simple, and they're done with rainbows and butterflies. And so, it's basically, if the kid doesn't want you to tell the parent, don't tell the parent, but tell everybody else at the school.
Okay, so one of the important steps is also to figure out how to get a policy introduced to the school district. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, on this policy, we have a sample policy on our website that we have vetted and that we are proposing. And so we're encouraging citizens to use that because we have run it by several different legal entities. So this is the one that we really stand behind. So first, I want to encourage you, again, you need to find out what current policy is, and then you need to educate yourself on the policy that's being proposed. And one of the number one things you're going to come up against is the state and the school board and the progressives are going to say, you can't do this policy, it's against the law. But on our website, we show and shoot down everything they say is against the law and show how it is perfectly legal. So the very first thing you have to do in knowing your current policy and educating yourself on the proposed policy is also preparing yourself for all the arguments against it. So look at our FAQs on the website. Look at the letters from the other attorneys. And then before you take it to the school board, you want to start to build some momentum. So before you do any of that, you want to educate yourself, and then you want to educate and empower a local community, whether it's your church Bible study, civic groups, Start to build a coalition. Maybe contact a school board or a family group that has done this in another district to see how they were able to gain the support for it. But the most important thing is that you understand the policy, you understand the pushback you're going to get, and you are prepared to answer those questions and concerns.
Of course, because everything they're going to say to you about a parental rights policy is that the child has the right to privacy, and so they're going to scare you away.
Yeah.
But you have to understand what the policy says, and that many lawyers have looked at this policy that's been proposed, and it's defensible. It's something that can be defended in the law. And when, especially here in California, when they talk about parental privacy rights for students, that's not a real thing, and we've covered that. But
Yeah.
I think that one of the important things also is to build support. Get a support team. You want people that you can trust, that you know will take parts of this task on and be responsible for. So it's a community effort. And I think that's been one of our strong suits, is being able to build up community support for this policy.
Yeah, and we have spent, I mean, Gina, your parent groups out there, you guys can do this. And certainly there's different parts of our coalition who are willing to help and have the bandwidth to do that. But we spent numerous hours on coalition building conference calls where we talked through the language. We talked about what the other side is saying. We split up the research. And so we've done a lot of that for you, but it's important that you build that kind of support locally, because the left is already organized on this issue, and they're going to come tell you it's illegal, and they're going to say three things. And our FAQs address this on the website. They're going to say a minor has a right to privacy, and you're not allowed to out them to their parents, which is crazy. The second one they say is because of AB 1266, you can't do this. However, you can. AB 1266 just said you have to allow a gender nonconforming student to be on the sports team and in the locker room they want to be in. And the other thing they use is FERPA, which is a federal law. And FERPA, which again, we explain this on our FAQs, FERPA is exactly the opposite. It is a federal educational protection that protects parental rights in knowing what's going on at their child's school. So it's exactly the opposite. But the left will lie. And so it's important that you know and you're ready to combat with those three things when they tell you, here's why privacy. Well, we explain why that's not a legal reason.
So parents have to do their homework.
They do.
You can't walk in and not expect to be able to respond to some of the things they're going to say to you. So let's give an example of how a parent might get a policy onto their school board's agenda.
Okay, well, this is going to vary depending on your local community and whether you have an ally on the board or not. But either way, and I've run into so many school boards, especially if they've never had a conservative on the board, that do not know about a California education code and several cases that have backed it up that allow a member of the public, that's any member, including a parent, but it allows a school board member to place an item on the school board agenda to be discussed. There is a caveat, and the caveat is that it has to be something that is under the jurisdiction of the school board. So you couldn't say you want In-N-Out burgers for lunch, put that on the school board agenda, because that really isn't under the purview of something the school board does. However, policies regarding parental rights is under the purview of the school board. And so you need to find out, most school boards have either a 2-week or a 30-day that you've got to submit it before they will place it on the agenda. So you've got to find out that. But then you take the policy and you do a formal letter to the school board and superintendent, and you request that this policy be brought up on, and you name the school board date. And if it's within the 15, 30 days, whatever the district's policy is, and I believe the state law says a reasonable amount of time, which is why most school districts do it within 15 or 30 days, they have to place that item on the agenda. And if they won't, this is one where all the case law shows that this is in the purview of what the school district. This does meet the letter and the spirit of the law in allowing a member of the public to put it on.
Right, and so our website will have a lot of that information for parents. But I think that because this could be frightening for some people, intimidating for some people, I think that if they start doing their homework, if they start listening to what's going on with all the parental fights across California and across the country, they will see that there are more people with them than there are against them. As a matter of fact, we just did a parental rights Rasmussen poll that showed that 82% of parents say that parents don't lose their rights once their child has entered the school. So we do have parental rights, and parents want to retain that. And one way to do that is to get a good policy into the school district. So before we finish, Karen, do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, I just want to encourage you that this can be done. We're seeing parents stand up across the nation, and we're seeing them stand up in California. And just because we can't get something passed in the legislature doesn't mean we can't and shouldn't pass it at the local level. And so those of us that care about parental rights, we need to take this to our school boards. And if our school boards don't adopt this policy, we need to vote them out and get in school board members who will. So the people are with us. One last thing about the polling. The polling that you guys did, it was in California, and over 60% of the people polled were Democrats. So it was not all church-going Republicans that agree at 82% that you don't lose your parental rights. So we need to reclaim those rights, and we need to join with people in our community to get this done.
Okay, Karen, well, thank you for that insight, and we look forward to moving forward with this across the state of California and hopefully across the nation, because we are just seeing so many pockets of parents who are willing to step up, who have never been involved before. But this is the time for parents to step up, because this really is the fight of our recent history, right? We've been in a lot of big fights.
Yes,
but this fight is a big one.
Absolutely. The fact that schools want to keep secrets from parents when their children are transitioning is unacceptable, and we must draw this line in the sand.
Absolutely. Okay, Karen, well, thank you for your time. Appreciate you and all you do.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Well, thank you for joining us on the Real Impact Podcast. I just hope this session was insightful, that you've learned a lot about how to hold on to your parental rights while you have your children in the public school system. And so let us know if you need any help. You can reach out to us at realimpact.us, and we are able and willing to help you with everything to do with your children in the public schools. So thank you. Take care.